Book of Heaven, Volume 29, Part 4. March 30th, 1931. Humiliations, Bearers of Glory. Tendernesses of the Heart of Jesus. A hard heart is capable of all evils. Invitation to take the crumbs of the divine goods. I am again in the nightmare of my usual sufferings. After a 1-month break, I am back at the start. I felt as though emptied of all pains. My sweet Jesus no longer made me become stiffened, nor did he render me immobile and without motion. I felt as if my life was ending in remaining without motion and stiffened. Yet I lived, but from a life that was choked, without the slightest control over myself, waiting with a patience which only Jesus could give me for the one who was to call me to obedience, to give me motion, and let me come out of the abyss I was in. So, seeing myself free, as much as I loved to share the pains together with Jesus, yet I felt my nature triumphant, more so, since I had no longer need of anyone. So, in finding myself bound again, hampered inside the previous abyss, my poor nature feels such reluctance that if my beloved Jesus does not help me, does not fortify me, does not attract me with special graces, I don't know what I would do so as not to fall into that state of sufferings. Oh, my Jesus, help me! You who have sustained me for so many years in a state so painful. Oh, please, if you want me to continue sustaining me yourself, and use your mercy toward this poor sinner, that I may not oppose your most holy will. Then, while I was amid reluctances and fear of being surprised by my usual sufferings, my adorable Jesus, making himself seen in great suffering, told me, "My daughter, what is the matter? You no longer want to suffer together with me? How can this be? You want to leave me alone? You want to take away from me the rights that you have given me many times, that I might do with you whatever I want? Good daughter, do not give me this sorrow. Abandon yourself in my arms, and let me do what I want." And I, my love, forgive me. You know the struggles I find myself in, and what profound humiliations I have been cast into. If things were as before, when did I ever refuse you anything? Therefore, mind and think, O Jesus, of what you are doing to me, and into what a maze you cast me, if you let me fall into my usual sufferings. And if I say to you, Fiat, the effort I make is so great that I feel myself dying. Jesus, Jesus, help me. And Jesus, my good daughter, do not fear. Humiliation is bearer of glory. Over the contempt of creatures arises the divine appreciation, and their abandonment is the call of the faithful company of your Jesus. Therefore let me do. If you knew how divine justice is armed, you would not be opposed. On the contrary, you would pray me to make you suffer, so as to spare, in part, your brothers. More regions will be devastated, and misery is at the doors of cities and of nations. My heart feels such tenderness in seeing to what a state of desolation and of confusion the earth will be reduced. And this tenderness of mine, so sensitive toward creatures, is offended by the hardness of the human heart. Oh, how intolerable to me is the hardness of the human heart! Much more so before mine, which is all loving tenderness and goodness toward them. A hard heart is capable of all evils, and reaches such extent as to make a mockery of the pains of others. And it changes the tendernesses of my heart toward it into sorrows and deep wounds. The most beautiful prerogative of my heart is tenderness. All the fibers, the affections, the desires, the love, the heartbeats of my heart have tenderness as their origin. So my fibers are tender. My affections and desires are most tender. My love and heartbeats are so tender as to reach the point of melting my heart out of tenderness. And this tender love makes me arrive at loving the creatures so much that I am content with suffering myself rather than seeing them suffer. A love, when it is not tender, is like a food without condiment, like a beauty that is aged, incapable of attracting anyone to make itself loved. It is like a flower without fragrance, like a dry fruit without humor and sweetness. A love that is hard, without tenderness, is unacceptable, and would have no virtue of making itself loved by anyone. Therefore my heart suffers so much in seeing the hardness of creatures, that they reach the point of changing my graces into scourges. After this I found myself prey to a supreme force, which it was not given to me to be able to resist in my painful state. And even though I felt great reluctance, I tried to abandon myself in the divine will, my only refuge. And Jesus, to give me strength, made himself seen for a little while, and told me, "My daughter, in creating man, our divinity issued from ourselves sanctity, love, goodness, beauty, and so forth, which were to serve man, to make himself holy, good, beautiful, and to give us love for love. Now, our divine goods have not been taken completely by him, and so they are waiting for one who would take them. Therefore come into our goods. Come to take the crumbs of sanctity, of love, of goodness, the crumbs of beauty, of strength. I say crumbs, in comparison with those which you will leave out. because our goods are immense, and what the creature can take can be called crumbs compared to what she leaves out. But for her, they fill her so much as to overflow outside. Only then is our love content, when it sees the creature loved in our goods, filled to the brim. Now, these crumbs form many different foods, one more beautiful than the other, which she takes from our celestial table, and she nourishes herself abundantly from these divine foods. And since one gives of that food which one takes, so in giving us her acts, of one who has nourished herself of these divine crumbs, which give of sanctity, of beauty, of strength, of love, and has filled herself with such beauty, we immediately recognize that it is food of our crumbs that she gives us in her acts. And oh, how content we remain that the creature gives us her acts that give of what is divine. We feel our fragrances. We touch our sanctity and goodness, and feel requited for the crumbs we gave her. Fiat. April 2nd, 1931. How what the creature has of most preciousness is the will. Power of the voluntary pains. The prop. How the little flame is lit in the soul, and how it is nourished. My abandonment continues in the holy volition, but though abandoned, I feel vividly my reluctances in falling into the state of my usual sufferings. And these reluctances are caused by the struggles and by the impositions that are over me. So in the bitterness of my soul I was saying to my sweet Jesus, "My love, you want to make me fall into sufferings? Go ahead, but from myself I don't want to put my will in. You will do it yourself. I will be happy, but from myself I don't want to put anything." And Jesus, all afflicted, told me, "My daughter, what am I to do with your pains without your will? I do not know what to do with them, nor will they be able to serve me, to disarm divine justice, or to placate my just indignation. Because what the creature has, of most beauty and preciousness, is the will. The will is gold. Everything else of her are superficial things, things without substance, and the very pains are without value. On the other hand, if the gold thread of the spontaneous will flows in the pains, it has the virtue of changing them into most pure gold, worthy of he who suffered everything voluntarily, and even death itself, for love of creatures. If I wanted pains without will, there is such an abundance of them in the world that I could take as much as I want. But since the gold thread of their will is missing, they are not for me. They do not attract me. They do not wound my heart. Nor do I find in them the echo of my voluntary pains. Therefore they do not have the virtue of changing the scourges into grace. So the pains without will are empty inside, without fullness of grace, without beauty, without power over my divine heart. A quarter of an hour of voluntary pains is enough to make up for and surpass all the most atrocious pains that exist in the world, because these are in the human order, while voluntary ones are in the divine order. And besides, from the little daughter of my will, I would never accept her pains without the spontaneity of her will. It was the will that rendered you beautiful and graceful in my eyes, that opened the currents of my manifestations on my divine will, and that with a magnetic force drew me to make my visits so often to your soul. Your will, sacrificed voluntarily for love of me, was my smile, my amusement, and had the virtue of changing my sorrows into joys. Therefore I will rather content myself with keeping the pains only for myself, rather than making you suffer without the spontaneous acceptance of your will. Oh, how you would degrade yourself, and would go down to the low level of the children of the human will, losing the noble title, the precious characteristic of daughter of my will. In my will there is no forcing. In fact, no one forced it in creating the heavens, the sun, the earth, and man himself, but it acted voluntarily, without anyone saying anything to it, for love of creatures. Yet it knew how much it was going to suffer because of them. So I want for one who wants to live of my will. Force is of the human nature. There is a footnote here for the word force, that it's meant to be read as doing things unwillingly, by force. Beginning again. Force, doing things unwillingly, by force, is of the human nature. Force is impotence, is mutability. Force is the true character of the human will. Therefore be attentive, good daughter. Let us not change things, and do not want to give this sorrow to my heart, too embittered. And I in my bitterness said, My Jesus, yet those who are above me tell me, how can this ever be possible, that because of 4 or 5 people who wanted to do evil, he would send so many chastisements? Rather, our Lord is right that the sins are many, and therefore the scourges, and many other things that they say, and that you know. And Jesus, all goodness, added, My daughter, how they deceive themselves! It is not because of the sin of the 4 or 5, who with so much perfidy have reached the point of calumnies. These will be punished individually. But it is the prop that they have taken away from me. Your sufferings served me as prop. Once the prop is taken away from me, my justice finds no one who sustains it, and remaining without a place to lean on, It made continuous and terrible scourges pour down during the time in which you have been free of your usual pains. But if the prop had been there, even if it had happened, it would have been a tenth or a fifth. More so, since this prop was formed of voluntary pains, and was wanted by me. And in voluntary pains enters a divine strength. I could say that I myself, in your pains, made myself prop, in order to sustain my justice. Now, not having your pains, I lack the material in order to form the prop, and therefore my justice remains free to do what it wants. From this they should comprehend the great good I have done to all, and to the entire world, in keeping you for so many years in the state of voluntary pains. Therefore, if you don't want my justice to continue to shake the earth, do not deny me your voluntary pains, and I will help you. Do not fear. Let me do. After this, I abandoned all of myself in the divine fiat, with the fear that I might deny something to Jesus, and that I might fail to do always the divine will. This fear tears my soul and makes me restless, and only in the presence of Jesus do I feel myself the peacemaker of long ago. But as soon as I lose sight of him, I return under the storm of worries, of fears, and reluctances. And my sweet Jesus to cheer me added, "Good daughter, courage! Be cheered! Do not lose heart." Do you want to know how the light of my divine will is formed in your soul? The repeated desires are like many blowings of breaths, which, blowing over your soul, call the little flame, the little drops of light, to light up inside of it. And the more intensely you desire, the more it blows, to nourish the little flame and enlarge it more. If the blow ceases, there is the danger that the little flame will be extinguished. So, in order to form and light the little flame, true and incessant desires are needed. And in order to mature and enlarge the light, love is needed, which contains the seed of light. In vain would you blow with your desires, if the inflammable material were missing over your repeated blows. But who places this little flame in safety, in such a way as to render it everlasting, with no danger of being extinguished? The acts done in my divine will, they take the material for lighting the little flame of our eternal light, which is not subject to being extinguished, and they keep it always alive and always growing. And the human will, before this light eclipses itself and becomes blind, and seeing itself blind, it no longer feels the right to act, and it gives peace to the poor creature. Therefore do not fear. I myself will help you to blow. We will blow together, so the little flame will be more beautiful and more refulgent. Fiat. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 29, Part 4. Fiat.